safari, generally the only thing separating you and the animals at night are the thin walls of a tent like this one here. The experience can be unforgettable, especially when you're retracing the footsteps of the greatest lion hunt of all time. This is Tsavo, the most remote region of East Africa in present-day Kenya. A century ago, the British government decided to build a railway through this region, from the port of Mombasa to Lake Victoria. The entire route bristled with hostile tribes and lions. In 1898, they sent an army engineer to build a bridge across the Tsavo River. His mission, and in a way that of the entire British Empire, was brought to a halt by two man-eating lions who mysteriously appeared on the scene. As a wildlife filmmaker and photojournalist, I have traveled throughout Africa. Nowhere is more stark, rugged, and unpredictable than the Tsavo, where John Patterson's courageous stand against these lions became legendary. Our journey began by dhow, the traditional Arab sailing vessel. We arrived on the east coast of Africa the same way Patterson did when he first saw the port of Mombasa 100 years ago. His personal journal became our guide.
As our boat made its way into its anchorage, the romantic surroundings of the East African harbour conjured up visions of stirring adventures of the past, and called to mind the many tales of reckless doings of pirates and slavers, which as a boy it had been my delight to read. The harbour was plentifully sprinkled with Arab dhows. In some, I believe, even now, slaves are occasionally smuggled off to Persia and Arabia.
We arrived at the dock on market day. The streets of Mombasa are much the same as Patterson found them, full of the intrigue of an exotic port. It was easy to see why the British colonials found this trade route so attractive. The local people are a mix of black African, Arab, Indian, and European cultures. To understand the legend of the man-eaters of Tsavo, we set out to learn everything we could about lions in general. One of the most famous big game hunters of all time was gracious enough to invite us to his home and share his experiences. For 50 years, Bunny Allen led safaris throughout East Africa. His long list of celebrity clients included Clark Gable and Ava Gardner. Is safari as romantic as it seems in the books? And is the rooster a part of the interview?
Appears to be. We get it driven away. Gitana, funguza do miyako. The word safari is romantic, there's no doubt about it. And going on safari, there's romance all around you. And if it's not there, you have to build it up. I mean, if you're going out to see some buffalo, and you come back to tell the people you've seen buffalo, they say how many. You don't say 5, you say 1,500. That makes them more interested. I suppose some of my most interesting hunts have been with lion, actually. It's a close touch between elephant or lion. But I've had some wonderful following up the tracks of lions, man killers, cattle raiders, and following them up, you know, sort of half a day, and then leaving them until the next day and following again. If you're attacked close up from in thick bush, well, you've got to put a shot in as quick as you possibly can from the hip. More often than not, you probably haven't got time to put the rifle up to your shoulder. And in fact, very often when you're in that thick bush, there's no room to put your rifle to the shoulder. I would say I've shot and killed at least 4 or 5 lions shooting from the hip. charging lions or about to charge, or I thought they were going to charge. Because the great thing is not to take a chance. If you think a lion is going to charge you, hit him before he charges. Patterson was an English country gentleman. I would say probably before he came out to Kenya, he was probably a gentleman farmer, probably from Berkshire. I know he was from Berkshire. A nice man, a very nice man, but a gentle creature. And you wouldn't say he was a great killer of animals. It got built up almost entirely because of Patterson's book, Man-Eaters of Tsavo. Those lions caused all their trouble when they were building the railway, around about Tsavo at that time, and those lions did a lot of damage. They killed a lot of people.
At first, rumors of man-eaters were dismissed. The British preferred to explain missing railway workers as deserters. It was the high noon of empire, and when the African natives were unwilling to work for the British, they simply imported thousands of men from India. These workers knew little or nothing about how to protect themselves in the African bush. They were easy prey. We spent time at Kenya's Railway Museum and learned that journalists of the day called the railway project the Lunatic Express. Patterson, hired to build a bridge over the Tsavo River, had no way of knowing he would find himself in a life and death standoff with man-eating lions for nearly a year. Since that time, his story has become an adventure classic. It also inspired a Hollywood film, The Ghost and the Darkness.
Much the same as the character I play, John Patterson. I love Africa and been going down there for many years. So the chance to tell a great African story, just as he wanted to go down at the turn of the century and have a great adventure, was primary.
I think what happened, the Tsavo incident, was a really remarkable story of a conflict between man and beast at a time when the wilderness sort of had the upper hand over man in a lot of Africa. The Masai Mara is Kenya's premier game reserve. It's really sort of a Garden of Eden. It's beautiful, fertile country, open plains, and plenty of grass, and a very, very large number of prey animals. Predators have an easy life there.
There is no better place in Africa to observe lion behavior than Kenya's famed Masai Mara Park. With so much game at hand, it is unlikely that lions like these would ever become man-eaters.
Strangely, because it's where life began, so you would think logically we would know the most about it, but still today it's the most mysterious continent and very much the subject of the story. What happens when you go to a place that is totally unknown, as prepared as you are for the mystery of what is in nature. And there's probably no more universal symbol than the lion of what is wild.
The Maasai herdsmen who share the Mara with the lion have never been conquered or enslaved by foreigners. Patterson referred to them as children of the wilderness. We admired the Maasai for their bravery, confronting lions with spears, not rifles.
I mean, you don't find one single Maasai going out after a lion, or it has happened, I have no doubt. but it's not a common occurrence. It's usually a matter of 20 or 25, 30 Morani go out with their spears and a sort of axe as well. Usually have a spear, an axe and a sword, sort of panga job, tucked away. And they'll go out, but usually it's a matter of quite a bunch of them. And they get up onto the, and of course they do try and separate the lion from the lionesses. They don't go for lionesses very often because they are far worse. You have to have a really wonderful eyesight. You have to have a good idea of what lions do, where they're likely to go, and of course, what else is you need a sixth sense, really. And that's why I do think that many of these, because to my mind, the best of white trackers can't compare with the best of black trackers. If I was tracking after anything, I always wanted my best tracker man, or a couple of them, beside me. The turning of a stone meant something to them, didn't mean anything to me. But the turning of a stone, they could see that had been turned over in the last half hour, whereas I couldn't see it, it was just a stone.
Nowadays, the lions stay well away from the Maasai. They go nowhere near them. They're afraid, they're scared stiff. And in parts of the Masai Mara today, you find during the day the lions disappear, and at night they come out and they disappear because they don't want to be around the Maasai and their cattle.
Philosophically, you can look at both sides of this tale and you can go, well, maybe the lions are protecting their land, or, you know, maybe it was Africa's last stand, you know, to try and stop this industrialization and the British Empire coming in.
One morning, I was delighted to receive an official letter instructing me to proceed to Tsavo to take charge of the construction of a section of the railway. I found the journey most interesting. As our train sped onward through the uplands, we saw a fine ostrich striding along as if having a race with us.
At the Tsavo train station, our group was met by Ian Allen, Dave Buitron, and Mohammed John, veteran guides who have been running safaris to the Tsavo for 20 years.
Hi, I'm Ian. Nice to meet you. Hi,
Shirley,
how are
nice
you?
to meet you. This is Mohammed, who's coming with us on the walk. Down the river. Take your bag.
From this point on, we would be living in the bush, just as Patterson and his Indian workmen had done.
Probably more lions in this part of Kenya than anywhere else outside the Masai Mara.
These lions, they have a history of being very dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. Their habits are different. The way they deal with their environment is totally different. They're not the kind of lions where you're going to drive up to them and see them lying on their back with their paws in the air like you can in the Mara or the Serengeti. These lions are out there and they're working hard. They're killers. They're machines, killing machines, and they're not going to let you close to them. We can see them from a distance, but they have a problem in this environment because they don't have the game and plentiful supply for killing.
It was a 10-mile drive to camp, which had already been prepared for us. Somewhere nearby, John Patterson first pitched his tent.
oh man, look at this, man. It's just incredible. Look at this, all this stuff.
Let us know if you need anything, and I'll see you guys down at the mess tent.
The camp sat on the banks of the Tsavo River, the life source of the region, where lions still come to hunt their prey.
The problem with the man-eaters really goes back a long way before the British started building their railway. You see, the only people that really crossed Tsavo in the old days were the Arab slave trade caravans. And they would set tribe against tribe, and then they would take the prisoners and they would march them all the way down to the coast to sell them in the slave markets in Mombasa. There would be a lot of men that were going to make no money in the markets at all. They would either be dying or dead, or they would be in such poor condition. The Arabs would just toss them out into the bush. The lions of Tsavo would find these dying or dead bodies just stumbling around in the bush, and they would kill them and they would eat them. So they developed a very good sense of human flesh.
Tsavo means a place of slaughter. You know, it has a haunted history. There was a massacre there from one local tribe massacring another tribe in their sleep. And another local tribe came back to fight them, so it's a place of many battles. There's a lot of blood soaked into the ground in Tsavo.
Over breakfast, we studied Patterson's book and made plans for the first day's trek.
By revisiting the area of the Tsavo River Bridge, what we're in effect doing is following in Patterson's footsteps. This must have been taken up near where the Tsavo station is. And I think this makes for a very interesting experience. It's almost like bringing history back to life, seeing Africa the way these first explorers and adventurers saw it. You can't see an inch through it. It has a sort of opaque yellow color, and you can have a hippo just inches below the surface, or a large crocodile, and not even be able to see them. So it's, when you're wading that river, it's always kind of a nerve, sort of a nerve-tingling thing. You don't know what's underneath the surface of the water.
You know, I don't believe there has been an incident with man-eating lions in Africa that comes close to the saga of the bridge building in Tsavo.
This is the first major obstacle that they got to when they were building the railroad, is when they reached this bank of the river. And it slowed them down, and the thing that slowed them down a lot was that they had to look around for the right sort of stone to build these pillars. And this stone here is soft, but they had to find it about a mile and a half away from here and then bring it in on a tram line. And so while they had all the crew camped here during that period, that's when they started to lose a few people to so-called man-eaters of Tsavo.
How many people did they lose?
They think they lost about 130 over the 10 months that they were building the bridge here. When the main crew moved on, they left just the smaller crew to start building the bridge, and that's when they really started to notice that there were people going missing. These guys were sort of hiding in their bomas at night. They'd build these big thorn bomas and build these big bonfires in the middle of them to try and keep the lions out.
And they had no weapons?
There were very few guns around, and it seemed like wherever the guns were, the lions were somewhere else.
There have been many points of view on this story. In The Ghost and the Darkness, the filmmakers focused on the epic nature of the tale. Patterson as a man caught between his love of Africa and his role as empire builder.
It was about a true story. I particularly like fact, particularly when the true story was almost impossible to believe. You have to wonder what was this all about? And that, I think, is what Bill Goldman was trying to do, Stephen Hopkins, our director, and certainly we were, is for you to question this phenomenal event that actually happened and say, well, what does this mean?
So much strangeness to do with the story, and because it cannot be explained, and the idea, a lot of the story where the lions stopped eating the people, just started killing them. They didn't even end up taking a lot of them. They would just come in, kill, and walk away and leave bits of these people all over the camp without even eating them after a while.
Dave, so those 3 hills there, they look very like the picture in the book. The tent where he was dragged out of would have been on the right of the track, is that right? Well, we could just orientate ourselves from these 3 hills.
I was roused one morning and told that one of my jemadars, a fine, powerful Sikh named Ungan Singh, had been seized in his tent during the night and dragged off and eaten, and his panic-stricken companions lay helpless, forced to listen to the terrible struggle which took place outside.
I think this is the area right about here where Ungan Singh was pulled out of that tent. And he dragged his body over into this area and ate him here.
Yeah, Mohammed's also pointing out that lions also like to always have some water nearby after they've fed so they can have a drink after they've eaten.
Oh, yeah. They actually propped him up against this bank somewhere around here. Certainly within probably 100 feet of us here. It was a particularly grisly scene because the lions had actually licked away his cheeks to make it a smile, and at first they thought he was alive when they were approaching him, but of course he was very dead.
Nothing frightened these lions in the least, and except as food, they showed a complete contempt for human beings. Having once marked down a victim, they would allow nothing to deter them from securing him, not a thick fence, a closed tent, a burning fire.
There had never been an incident like this recorded, and I don't believe there's been one since. I think for the sheer cunning of these 2 predators at the Tsavo Bridge, the fact that they were able to work systematically, attacking a different coolie camp every night, so that Patterson could never outguess them.
Male lions never work together. They have their individual prides, they fight, they never work together. Why did 2 lions eat 135 people in 2.5, 3 months? They weren't hungry. It has not been reported since. So now, and we talk about in the movie, depends upon your point of view. Some African tribes felt they were not lions, that they were spirits that were there to prevent the white man and the railroad from coming across the line. Other people felt that they were evil. That just as there are bad seeds, there are people who are intrinsically evil. These 2 lions were killers.
One dark night, the familiar terror-stricken cries and screams awoke the camps, and we knew that the demons had returned. The lion burst into the midst of the terrified group, seized an unfortunate wretch amid the cries and shrieks of his companions, and dragged him off through the thick thorn fence. He was joined outside by the 2nd lion, and so daring had the 2 brutes become that they did not trouble to carry their victim any further away, but devoured him within 30 yards of the tent.
If you're in that camp every night and these lions are coming and killing everyone, people you know, people you don't know, and leaving dead bodies scattered everywhere every night, it's that, you would think that was evil, It's one thing for them to come and eat, but they just seem to go on this rampage, this maddening rampage of death.
The only thing they could really do to try and protect themselves was to just get out of reach, and so they actually stopped construction for a couple of days so that everybody could rig themselves up with a perch somewhere. They were going up onto the water tanks, sleeping on the tops of the water tanks, building little bed platforms up in all the trees. In one case, the tree actually fell over. There were so many guys sleeping in it that the whole tree just collapsed.
Sometime during the period, they managed to focus in on the hospital tent where they knew that these people were defenseless. And that takes some quite uncanny cunning for an animal to work that out.
One of the hunters suggested that they move the hospital in the camp, because the lions kept on coming and sniffing around the hospital. You know, there's a lot of smell of disease and blood, and there were like 60 or 70 people in this hospital. So they moved it a mile away, right to the other end of the camp, put guards around it, built tents, and then they waited in the old hospital. They actually poured blood all over the walls, all outside, slaughtered pieces of slaughtered animals, and had bits all around the old hospital. They waited inside for the lions, and the lions went to the new hospital.
I sat up every night for over a week near likely camps, but all in vain. Either the lions saw me and then went elsewhere, or else I was unlucky, for they took man after man from different places without ever once giving me a chance of a shot at them.
Another reason the lions were able to elude Patterson was they were blessed with quite a bit of luck. And I think probably the most extraordinary example of that was the time that Patterson set up this sort of boxcar trap. And he actually succeeded one evening in luring one of these lions into the trap with 2 Indian sepoys as bait. And they were being protected from the lion by dividing bars. But when the lion went into the trap and the trap door slammed shut behind him, he immediately went into a rage and at close quarters just started flinging himself against the bars.
What could possibly go wrong, you know? So you got 3 guys in there with rifles 10 feet away from this lion, who starts destroying the trap because it's so powerful, smashing the bars towards them and roaring so loud that one of the 3 men lost his hearing completely.
And these sepoys were so terrified that they couldn't even sort of get it together to shoot for about 5 minutes. And finally, when they did shoot, they used up all their ammunition without even hitting the lion. And one of their shots actually sprung open the trap door of the cage and let the lion go. It was just an extraordinary piece of bad luck for Patterson.
You know, so much of the real story is about Patterson's grit and determination. And he sort of stubborned the lions to death, I think is what he did. He hung out and he wouldn't give up.
The terror that they represent is very like the terror that we experience in childhood of just nighttime in their fantasy. This was a reality. So many of the cultures throughout the whole continent used this story. And there were many stories that these were 2 witch doctors that had been assigned to stop the British Empire. And it remains mysterious. Well, I think that things have power, and the Patterson story and the movie represent bravery in confronting the unknown in yourself.
The lions had tried to snatch a man from the camp by the river, but being foiled in this, had seized one of the donkeys and were at that very moment devouring it. Now was my chance.
He has a chance to kill this lion. First time really solid, can end his life, and this gun misfired. The mystery of why they were so attached to Patterson was what he was dealing with. Why is this happening to me? And he's an engineer, though, very meticulous man. So his whole, what makes sense to him in the world, it's completely shattered.
Yeah, so this is the spot where Patterson had his machan built. It was about a 12-foot high platform, and he sat up there with a donkey as bait, a dead donkey tied up to the base of it as bait. And he sat up there hoping to shoot the lion.
I felt pretty sure the brutes would return to the carcass at nightfall. As there was no tree close at hand, I had a staging erected some 10 feet away from the body of the donkey. The silence of an African jungle on a dark night needs to be experienced to be realized, especially when one is absolutely alone. Suddenly I was startled out of my reverie by the snapping of a twig. Straining my ears, I fancied I could hear the rustling of a large body forcing its way through the brush. Very soon, a deep, long-drawn sigh, a sure sound of hunger, came from the bushes. Matters quickly took an unexpected turn. The hunter became the hunted, and instead of coming for the donkey, the lion began stealthily to stalk me. For 2 hours, he horrified me by slowly creeping round and round my crazy structure, gradually edging nearer and nearer. Every moment, I expected him to rush it. If one of the flimsy poles should break, or if the lion could spring the 12 feet, I heartily repented my folly. Before he could come any nearer, I took careful aim. I was no longer able to see him, but kept blazing away in the direction in which I heard him plunging about. At length came a series of mighty groans, deep sighs, finally ceasing altogether. I shouted that I was safe and that one of the lions was dead. Every man in the camp came running to the scene. To my amazement, they kneeled and saluted me with cries of "Mubarak, Mubarak," which means savior.
On the way back to camp, we came upon a lion kill, abandoned for some strange reason. This surely meant that lions were in the area. Ian and Mohammed found tracks nearby that were only a couple of hours old.
But I think in those days, hunters were much more daring. So then when you can really bring a lion down with a big rifle with a large caliber bullet, which means you've got one shot. I'm no fan of hunting, I will never do it, but I sort of admire what it took in those days.
Back at the camp, we heard the lions. Ian gauged they were less than a mile away. The experience was profound. These were the descendants of Patterson's man-eaters.
I think there are cubs back there. We're going to have to be extremely quiet, probably quieter than it's possible for us to be. You know, Mohammed and I, we followed them for probably, must have been about 200-300 yards. And although we didn't see the lions, we heard them. I mean, there was no doubt we could hear the bushes rustling as they ran away. And they were moving, at least it looked as if they were moving towards a bunch of rocks, a group of rocks off to our left. And I think that there's a pride there. I think there are some young ones there as well. What I'd like to do tomorrow morning is very early to follow those prints and try and get in as close to those rocks as we can without being detected, and then let's see what we see. I think they'll probably stand their ground, but even if we didn't see them very well, we're going to hear them, and that's the amazing thing when you're on foot in that bush, is literally the ground reverberating to their roars. It's incredible.
These are going to be real Tsavo lions.
Oh, they are the genuine article, as they would say in Australia, no doubt about it.
The hippos in the river were our wake-up call.
Oh, comes breakfast. Great.
Habari?
In the morning we heard a lion had been sighted in a Kikuyu village near our camp.
Jambo. Jambo mingi. Jambo mingi. Mzuri. Yeah. Yeah. Sisi nakuja sababu. Yeah. Sisi nasikia simba mbili na jaribu nakuja nyumba yako na jaribu na ua ngombe.
Pitia sangine huko na huko kwenye miti huko chini. Alafu usiku ukiwa nalala unasikia mlio wa ng'ombe inalialia. Kule masauti ya ng'ombe buzi inasumbua sisi sana.
What he's saying is that only last week 2 lions, one came from over there and one over here quite late at night to try and get a cow that he had tied over here. And fortunately for him, he had some friends visiting him at the time, and there were enough of them to be able to get tin cans and make a noise and chase them away. The lions will come out, they know the cattle are defenseless, they put up no resistance. This is the reason why they build what they call the boma around the village here, this thorn thicket. It doesn't work most of the time, so as you know from the man-eaters, they could leap over 10-foot thorn thickets.
Kwanza hata usingizi hatupati kabisa, maana saa nyingine tunakaa nalala alafu tunasikia makelele. Yeah.
They kept awake all night long from the roars of these lions. This would be an excellent place to actually try and pick up the spoor of the lions and actually try and track them. Yeah.
Muhammad, I think, is one of the finest bushmen I've ever known. He's a true Samburu warrior who has been working with the national parks now for, I think, 22 years. And he has a very, very profound feeling for the wildlife in Tsavo. To see him walking through the bush, you're watching a science. When they back away, they move to the rocks, and it's very obvious why, because they lose themselves in there. The camouflage is so good. And it was a question of just keeping the pug marks in view and moving as fast as we could. The most we were hoping for was just to get a glimpse, just so that people could at least say, well, we saw a real lion in the African bush. When you're walking through the bush in Tsavo, usually all you get from a lion is a grunt, and you'll see its hind quarters and its tail disappearing through the bush. If you follow them, they'll probably let you advance 100 yards, and then they'll stop, and then they'll take their stands, and they'll make pretty clear to you that you don't go any further. When you're 100 feet from a lion and you're hearing its movements in the bush, you hear the bushes crackling, and then you get the roar, the grunt, or whatever it is, that's quite an experience in its own.
There was the lion, feeding only a few hundred yards from a group of elephants. They were nervous.
There's so many strange mythical qualities about this tale. And the lions had an intelligence and forms of habits that didn't make sense at all. Like, you know, when they found the cave, the lions never drag animals back to their caves. They eat where they kill. you know, or instead of having this cave full of bones and jewelry, you know, they thought at one point it might have been people involved, because there were cults. The Maasai had cults of lion worshippers as well, which was a black form of magic for them, where they would dress up as lions, and sometimes they would kill as lions using lion claws to kill people.
We hoped that Patterson's journal would help us locate the long-lost den of the man-eaters, so we split into two groups to look for clues.
Dave, do you read me? Over.
Yeah, I read you loud and clear. Ian, go ahead. Dave, can you give me your approximate location now, please? Over. We're about 1.5 miles southwest of the Tsavo Bridge. We're coming up on a hill with a baobab tree on top of it.
Things are looking quite good here. We're approaching a rock, and I'm feeling quite positive about this. My position is probably about 1/2 mile on from you, a little further south and down by the river's edge. Have you got an idea of that? Over.
Yeah, roger. We'll be up with you, I hope, in about 10 to 15 minutes. We're on our way. Over.
20 minutes.
Oh, Ian, have you got anything yet?
Dave, look, this is getting better by the second.
Got a very good feeling about it. The rocks we're standing at the bottom of.
A perfect line country. You make your way to these rocks. We'll wait for you on the west side. Over. We should be with you in 10, 15 minutes. We're on our way.
Quite by accident, I stumbled upon the lair of these dreaded demons. Close under an overhanging tree stood a sandy hillock, and on looking over the top of this, I saw on the other side a fearsome-looking cave. Inside the cavern, I was thunderstruck to find a number of human bones, with here and there a copper bangle such as the natives wear. Beyond all doubt, the man-eater's den.
Lion tooth marks on this bone.
It just fits perfectly. It's got the description. They could even see the bridge over here this way.
Na unafikiri hii ni maneno ya simba hapa amekula hii.
These are waterbuck bones. No leopard could ever drag a waterbuck up into an area like this. It's got to be a lion.
When John Patterson finally tracked down the second lion, he was prepared. Several rifles, an African guide, and a determination to finish the job.
And what makes it, I think, a really poignant story, he's not out to conquer Africa. He loves it. So, and it really is, in my opinion, how he ended up ending the lives of these lions. He wasn't in opposition.
It was a most fascinating sight to watch this great brute stealing stealthily toward us. His skill showed that he was an old hand at the terrible game of man-hunting. I waited until he got quite close, then fired my .303 at his chest. I heard the bullet strike, but it had no knockdown effect. He turned and made off with great long bounds.
Again, he was using this .303, which wasn't a strong enough weapon, so his first shot hit the lion square in the chest, but it didn't stop him. The lion ran away, and he had to follow it. And it was he had quite a hair-raising incident there because he was down on the ground with the lion and he got charged by it a number of times even after he'd wounded it.
Suddenly, a fierce warning growl right in front of us. I at once took careful aim and fired. I fired again and knocked him over. But in a second he was up once more and coming for me. I seized the carbine from Mahina. With the first shot I fired, he fell over and lay motionless. Foolishly, I walked up towards him. To my surprise, he jumped up and attempted another charge. This time, a martini bullet in the chest and another in the head finished him for good and all. He dropped in his tracks not 5 yards away from me and died gamely, biting savagely at a branch which had fallen on the ground.
Evil walked the earth for a bit. It came out of the landscape and showed itself.
Were they evil spirits or a freak of nature? No matter what the explanation, we all now felt the formidable power of these two lions. This was a safari we would never forget.
Another